September 1944. Europe holds its breath. In just 30 days, General George S. Patton's Third Army had torn across France, smashing through German lines and racing toward Germany's frontier. To the public, Patton looks unstoppable, old blood and guts pushing faster than any Allied commander. But at the banks of the Moselle River, the advance suddenly stalls. Fuel tanks run dry, autumn rains turn the fields into mud, and from the morning fog roll factory-fresh German Panthers. What follows is not the clean dash to the Rhine Patton dreamed of, but a brutal slugging match of failed river crossings, ambushes, and desperate counterattacks. At Arracourt, Sherman's and Hellcats will duel Panthers in swirling fog, while Patton's hopes of ending the war in 1944 slip further away. This is the battle for Lorraine, the campaign that tested Patton like never before. By late August 1944, General George S. Patton's Third Army had achieved what seemed impossible. In less than a month, his tanks and infantry had raced more than 400 miles from the hedgerows of Normandy to the eastern frontier of France. Villages cheered, German units collapsed, and Patton believed he was only weeks away from breaking into Germany itself. His eye was fixed on the Moselle River and the historic gateway of Lorraine, the same corridor that armies had used for centuries to march east or west across Europe. If he could cross the Moselle and seize Metz and Nancy, the road to the Saar industrial heartland, and perhaps the Rhine itself lay open. But just as momentum reached its peak, the advance faltered. The Third Army's supply lines stretched back to Normandy, and gasoline became Patton's true enemy. His divisions required nearly 400,000 gallons of fuel per day to keep moving. By the first days of September, they were receiving barely a fraction of that. Tanks stood silent on muddy roads, convoys stalled, and for 5 days the entire Third Army sat idle. That pause gave the German High Command the breathing space it desperately needed time to rush reinforcements, reorganize battered divisions, and prepare to contest every crossing of the Moselle. As Patton's men reached the Moselle in early September, the river had swollen from heavy autumn rains. Its steep banks, swift currents, and surrounding fortifications made every crossing a nightmare. Patton's XX Corps, under General Walton Walker, tried first south of Metz at Dornot. On September 8, elements of the 5th Infantry Division forced their way across in assault boats, clinging to a shallow bridgehead under constant artillery fire from the ancient forts around Metz. For 2 days, they held on against counterattacks by the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, but the position became untenable. Exhausted and bloodied, the Americans withdrew. A second attempt came just downstream at Arnaville. This time, engineers worked through the night under enemy fire, erecting a pontoon bridge. By morning, US armor had crossed, but again, the long-range guns of Metz and fierce German counterattacks pinned them down. The Moselle, it seemed, would not be crossed cheaply. Further south, near Pont-à-Mousson, Major General Horace McBride's 80th Division tried its luck. Infantrymen crossed in boats, establishing foxholes on the eastern bank. But German artillery and a counterattack by the veteran 3rd Panzer Grenadier Division annihilated the position, leaving hundreds dead. Each crossing attempt revealed the same grim truth. The Germans were regaining strength, and Patton's dream of a swift advance was slipping away in the mud and blood of the Moselle Valley. While Patton's men struggled along the Moselle, the German High Command seized its chance. September 1924 was a moment of crisis for Hitler's armies. They had lost hundreds of thousands of men in France, but now the battered Wehrmacht was pulling itself back together for one more stand. Hitler ordered the creation of 25 new Volksgrenadier divisions units filled with a mix of seasoned veterans, fresh conscripts, and men drawn from the Luftwaffe Navy. At the same time, 10 new Panzer Brigades were rushed into existence. Each promised a battalion of the formidable Panther tank. In Lorraine, General Johannes Blaskowitz's Army Group G was tasked with stopping Patton. He was reinforced with the crack 3rd and 15th Panzer Grenadier Divisions, shifted by rail from Italy, as well as the newly formed 106th and 112th Panzer Brigades. Though hastily assembled and short on radios and training, these brigades brought something the Germans badly needed: armor. To lead the counterstroke, Hitler summoned one of his most skillful panzer commanders, General Hasso von Manteuffel. Small in stature but brilliant in maneuver, Manteuffel had made his reputation on the Eastern Front. Now, with the 5th Panzer Army under his command, he was ordered to smash Patton's advance, retake Lunéville, and roll the Americans back across the Moselle. The stage was set. Patton's fuel-starved divisions faced an enemy rebuilding its strength, sharpening its claws, and preparing to strike back. On the morning of September 18, 1944, a thick fog clung to the hills and fields around Lunéville in northeastern France. Out of that mist came the steel thunder of Manteuffel's counterattack. Leading the charge were Panthers from the newly arrived 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, fresh from the factory floor, their long guns ready to punch through American lines. Behind them rumbled half-tracks of Panzer Grenadiers, fanning out to sweep aside U.S. infantry. The initial blow smashed into the thin screen of the U.S. 42nd Cavalry Squadron. Lightly armed M8 armored cars and self-propelled guns were no match for Panthers. Vehicles burned, men scrambled, yet the cavalry bought precious hours, slowing the advance until reinforcements arrived. By afternoon, Lunéville itself was a battlefield of smoke and rubble, with tanks firing down narrow streets and American defenders clinging to every stone wall. One battalion in particular, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, earned its place in legend that day. Armed with the nimble M18 Hellcat, its crews used speed and concealment to outflank Panthers at close range. By nightfall, they had destroyed 8 German tanks without losing a single Hellcat. Still, the German thrust was far from over. Manteuffel intended to push through Lunéville, sweep north, and sever Patton's bridgeheads on the Moselle. But the fight for Lorraine was about to shift to open fields near the small village of Arracourt, where fog, maneuver, and improvisation would decide the outcome. On September 19, as the fog lifted over the fields near Arracourt, German Panthers emerged in long columns, their silhouettes breaking through the morning mist. Waiting for them was Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams and his 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division. Abrams, a hard-driving commander with an instinct for maneuver, understood that in a straight duel, the Sherman was no match for the Panther. The German gun could pierce American armor at long range. The key was movement, striking first, striking fast. Abrams dispersed his Shermans in concealed positions, using the rolling hills and ridgelines as cover. When the Panthers stumbled forward blindly through the fog, the Shermans struck from the flanks, firing into their thinner side armor. Entire German platoons were caught off guard, burning before they could bring their guns to bear. In one action, Company C destroyed 11 panzers in minutes, then slipped away to ambush another column. Supporting Abrams were artillery observers who rained down hundreds of rounds onto German assembly areas, and the ever-present P-47 Thunderbolts of XIX Tactical Air Command swooping in when the skies cleared. In just 2 days of fighting, Abrams's battalion and its partners blunted wave after wave of German armor. The cost was real, Shermans burned too, but the balance was lopsided. For every American tank lost, several Panthers lay smoking in the fields. Arracourt was becoming the graveyard of Hitler's new Panzer Brigades. While Patton's Americans battled near Arracourt, to the south, another clash unfolded that would cripple Germany's plans even further. General Philippe Leclerc's 2nd French Armored Division, fighting under Patton's XV Corps, intercepted the German 112th Panzer Brigade near the town of Dompaire on September 12. The brigade had been rushed forward as part of Hitler's emergency armor reserve. Its tanks were brand new, its crews inexperienced, and its orders simple: drive the French back and secure the Moselle crossings. Leclerc's veterans saw the opportunity. Using the rolling countryside to mask their approach, French Shermans and half-tracks struck hard into the German column. At the same time, waves of American P-47 Thunderbolts from Otto Wayland's XIX Tactical Air Command raked the battlefield with rockets and bombs. German Panthers, caught in the open with no air cover, erupted in flames one after another. The battle raged for 2 days, but by the end, the 112th Panzer Brigade had been virtually annihilated. Out of 90 tanks, 69 lay destroyed. The survivors fled in disarray, leaving wreckage smoldering in the fields. For the French, Dompaire was a resounding victory proof that their reborn army could stand alongside Patton's men. For Hitler, it was a disaster. Two of his newest Panzer brigades, the 106th at Mary and the 112th at Dompaire, had been gutted before they could even stabilize the front. By late September, the battle for Lorraine had become a relentless struggle of attrition. Manteuffel, ordered by Hitler to continue attacking despite staggering losses, turned his attention to the high ground near Arracourt. Two ridges, Hill 318 and Hill 265, dominated the approaches to Nancy. If the Germans could seize them, they might still pry open a path. At dawn on September 27, the 11th Panzer Division hurled itself at the camelback ridge of Hill 318. American armored infantry from the 51st Battalion dug into foxholes on the northern slope, supported by 6 artillery battalions. The first German assaults were shredded by massed fire, but under cover of nightfall, Panzer Grenadiers crept up the southern side, storming foxholes and clawing their way to the crest. For 2 days, the summit shifted hands in brutal close combat, men fighting at bayonet range while shells churned the ground into smoking craters. On September 29, Manteuffel committed his last reserves, 40 tanks, to break the line. Fog again cloaked the ridges, but American Shermans hidden on the slopes knocked out Panthers at point-blank range. When the fog cleared, P-47 swooped in, blasting German columns funneling through Bures. By afternoon, the Panzer Grenadiers cracked, abandoning the hill and retreating south. At Hill 265, the story was the same. Repeated attacks broken by artillery and stubborn infantry. By the end of September, the German offensive had bled itself white. The ridges stayed in American hands. By the close of September 1944, Lorraine was littered with burned-out Panthers and Shermans, smashed villages, and exhausted men. The Germans had thrown everything they could scrape together at Patton, new Panzer brigades, veteran divisions, and Manteuffel's skill as a commander. The result was catastrophic for them. At Arracourt alone, the U.S. 4th Armored Division destroyed more than 280 German tanks and vehicles, crippling the very brigades Hitler had promised would restore the front. 2 months earlier, Germany had seemed broken. Now, in Lorraine, it had proven it could still fight, but at a terrible cost. For Patton, the outcome was bittersweet. His Third Army had blunted the counterattack and bloodied Germany's armor, but he was ordered onto the defensive. Fuel shortages and Eisenhower's decision to shift supplies north meant Patton could not drive to the Rhine as he had hoped. Metz remained in German hands, its fortress guns still a thorn in his side. The Lorraine campaign revealed hard truths. Speed and daring alone could not overcome rivers, fortresses, and supply lines. Sherman tanks, when used with mobility, artillery, and air power, could outmatch Panthers, but not without losses. And above all, the battle showed how quickly the German army could recover from disaster, forcing even Patton to pause. Lorraine had tested old blood and guts more severely than Normandy. It was not his triumph, but it was his lesson.